Hi, this is Tom Johnson, and you are listening to another recording of the AI Book Club, A Human in the Loop. This is the sixth book in the list of books that we've been reading. This book club discussion has about 6 different people from a lot of different areas, not all technical writers. And we chat about Karen Howe's Empire of AI. Dreams and Nightmares in Sam Altman's OpenAI. It's a very recently published book. I mean, same year, 2025 at some point. It's a long book with a lot of detail. So the people who read it are truly dedicated, got through it. It was a challenging book, a lot of moral conflicts that it sort of poses if you're working in tech and so on, and trying to learn how to use AI effectively while also navigating the other ethical challenges and so on. Anyway, this is a Google Meet recording, so the audio isn't going to be great, but you can also read a transcript. I'm going to post the transcript in this post, as well as some other learning resources that I make available, such as a Notebook LM. And if you have questions, feel free to leave a comment on the post or reach out. And thanks for listening. If you want to know more, go to i'dratherberwriting.com/AI-book-club. And you can read the schedule, see what we're discussing next. We'd love to have you. Feel free to join in. Thanks again. Well, thanks for joining. So let's kick this off. We've got a handful of people. And let me share my screen a little bit to warm us up. All right. I tried something a little bit different this time. So we're going to be discussing Empire of AI, Dreams and Nightmares in Sam Altman's OpenAI by Karen Howe. This book was very recently published. I mean, it's incredible how recent a book can be around current events. I feel like it's just like months old from describing the latest things happening. But what I did this time is in the notes document at the top, I pasted in a link to Notebook LM. I'm not sure if you've really used this yet much, but maybe you have. It's quite an impressive tool. You can add in a bunch of different sources. So what I start out by doing, just to try to ramp up on things, is I'll do like a Gemini deep research just to get like all the summary and info about the book into this big, huge report, and I'll use that as like the starter material. Then I added in a bunch of reviews, podcasts, transcripts, YouTube interviews, and so on, as well as other info that I was just curious about, the parallels to the Empire argument and so on, and like just all the information about previous empires and AI colonialism and the environmental impact. So add in all these sources, and then on the right under Studio, you can choose what kind of learning assets you want. Video overview is hands down one of the most amazing tools. If you click video overview, by default, it will just generate like a 6-minute video based on all the sources. But what you can do is select which sources you want. Let's say you only want like one source. You pick that source, click video interview, and then it creates a video based on just that source. So as I was trying to just wrap my head around things, I created like a number of different videos. And so if you click any of these things, it could be, I'm not sure if it says which source it's based off of, but you can see it's like, not everything. Anyway, whatever you're learning about, this is a great tool. It's also audio and reports and so on, flashcards, quiz. Let's see, somebody raised their hand. Hold on. Yeah. Oh, no.
Oh, no, yeah, I just said
got
it. Cool. That's all.
Yeah. Have you all used Notebook LM before?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm dying for my kids to use it to learn things at school, like geometry and chemistry when they're stuck and I can't really help them. But so far in my school, at least, it's not really I don't even think many teachers know about it, but even if they do, it's blocked. It's like, it's kind of restricted. Anyway, I did generate some starter questions from one of these reports. You can build your own, and I was like, let's come up with some questions, and that's what I put here. But I also have a lot of other thoughts, and part of the reason I didn't sink too much time into crafting questions manually is because we usually take an unforeseen path through topics in our discussion, which is what I want. So anyway, let's start off with a general question. And let me unshare my screen. I don't really need to show that screen. What were your overall thoughts in reaction to the book? Did you like it? Did you feel like it was a waste of time? Was it like worthwhile? And tell me just your general high-level reactions. Anybody want to start us off?
I could start. So I thought the book was really good, and I thought it was just in terms of like composition, just like a really powerful, premise of using sort of the history of AI as like being sort of like a example of like AI companies in general that have followed a colonial model of extracting resources and exploiting labor to enrich the elite of tech. And things I found most striking were, I mean, I already knew that like about stories of like, offshoring, very cheap labor to global South countries. But I think hearing the stories, reading the stories, was very harrowing, and just like how labor is exploited, how materials are extracted. So that I think that really got to me, even though like I've studied colonialism and capitalism, and so they're not necessarily surprises. And I did like how had like examples and ideas about creating more restorative projects regarding AI. So I like that as well, and it got me to thinking about, how does one balance using AI but also like like reforming it, and it also brings up the question versus like reform versus like revolution, in terms of like those are different projects, I think, and like how do they fit together, I guess. So I'll stop there.
Those are excellent observations. In fact, your first observations about the on-the-ground reporting and the closeness of the author's experience with the people in Kenya and the South, like, was it Chile, Uruguay? Anyway, really does hit home, right? Like, because it's so much more immediate that she's traveled there, that she's like talked with the people, she's giving an inside look. This was brought out in a podcast I was listening to on this called Time to Say Goodbye. It was really good. The hosts were saying that she's like traveling everywhere for this book. And the amount of research is sort of staggering. I mean, she started this project like 5-6 years ago, before OpenAI was even, a big topic. So yeah, did anybody else like that part about? Let's just start out with Dan's first kind of topic on the ground reporting with the kind of like exploited populations, Kenya, elsewhere. And the water stories, people drinking brown water because they sell all their water to AI companies to cool data centers. If you have any thoughts on that, feel free to jump in. But yeah, go ahead, Molly.
Oh wait, I think Sahir, sorry. I'll go real quick. I'll just say, like, I appreciated it because I feel like I've read, I feel like a lot of the things I read are very removed from those situations, and they might say it's bad, but kind of like as just a footnote. And it felt it didn't feel good, but it felt right to really appreciate just like on a personal level these stories. So I really appreciated the detail. But that's just my thoughts about it. Sahar, if you want to add.
Um, I just wanted to add that being a part of a country that is in global south, it was really hurtful to read all of that. Um, this story is definitely heart touching. I do like to read things that are very like closer to reality, and I love the fact that it has a journalistic element to it, like bringing truth to the people who are reading it. So that book was definitely not a waste of time. It was a bit lengthy, but again, it was not a waste of time. What I really, I mean, there was this time when industrialization was happening and the whole sewage system was happening, and now we have people who pick up our trashes and take it away from our homes. These people are they're paid very little amount, but they contribute a major part in protecting us from the health crisis. I'm sorry, I'm not a native speaker. So they protect us from the diseases, they protect us from viruses just by picking up the trash, and they are paid way little. So the same thing is happening with the revolution of AI. The people who are being exploited, the people who are paying the real cost, are being paid way less and are more vulnerable to the environmental crisis that are going to come with this evolution that is happening. One thing that I really liked was that the book started with this non-profit ideal, and it's like slowly erosion into a commercial empire, and then it touched upon the human cost and the environmental cost. So it did definitely hit home, but I felt like it's not something new. We have seen this happening to our people all the time. I mean, the people who are the most important to us, the resources that we are using, the resources we are using, we are depriving them of basic healthcare, basic necessities of life, just so we can do the technological advancement. That was definitely a very heart touching part of the book. And I feel like that this also stresses upon the fact that the human cost of every invention and innovation should always be considered before taking into account the scalability or the a marketing of the product or the technological innovation.
Hey, that's great. Thank you for your insights and observations. Yeah, this theme that you're pointing out about like Silicon Valley and the tech companies sort of being in a bubble, and we don't see the impact of all these technologies on many of the more vulnerable populations and areas of the world is definitely a really salient point. Does anybody have any comments or thoughts on that they want to build on or react to? Yeah, I thought that was probably one of the most important takeaways from the book, really. And no doubt the authors going and traveling to these places in order to really hit that point home was probably a key motivation in writing the book. Definitely landed that well. Now, I felt like I was looking for counter arguments here and there to try to get more balanced perspective, because some people who have read the book did offer some counter arguments that hey, some of these societies could be benefiting by some of these technologies. I think that was a point in the last chapter that she tried to bring up, that there is some benefit that people could experience in certain lights and situations. Let's look at that last chapter. This is something Dan also kind of liked. Did you find that last chapter an inspiring way to bring about AI transformation? I personally, the last chapter, I felt conflicted about. I felt like OpenAI had started out with this similar idealism about they wanted to be open and transparent and provide the benefits of the AGI to like all of humanity. But the reality is that you need infrastructure and compute, and the only way to get that is through selling your soul to shareholders who want to have a profit, and it starts that whole wheel turning. So I felt, yeah, go ahead.
I thought that, I mean, I did think it was really interesting how, and a couple books have made this point, that the the growth of AI in the last 15 years has created this trajectory like the Big Bang, where it's hard to imagine other kinds of alternatives. But the thing I liked about the last chapter was that it was an example of something that she argues is smaller in scale. It's more narrowed and focused, so it doesn't necessarily need infinitely scaled compute for a specific purpose. And her writing about the loss of the languages was very poignant and I think very powerful. And so I did really like that. And it reminded me of Molly had mentioned that the first the beginning of chapter 4, this quote that comes from Power and Progress about technologies not being inevitable, that it requires this rallying ambition, and that the people who usually have the resources are the elite, and thus the rallying ambition, which is usually to help everyone, ends up only helping the few. And it again, it made me think about well, what are reformist policies, which I think she gives an example of, versus revolutionary policies. But it did make me think about what are ways to reform AI, I guess, or what are ways to do it more ethically. Yeah. And one of and the one that I'll just name one, the idea of trying to advocate for living wages for people in global South countries, and that's just a version of it's a more extreme degree about what's happening here. I mean, there is also people who are going to be losing their jobs, whole industries of people. And I think that the argument that you're talking about, Tom, is that some people think it's infantilizing people by saying oh, well, they might have other ways of using it. They're not, you're not giving them agency by saying they're all exploited. But we're kind of in the same boat. I mean, we can use it for things too, in really creative and interesting ways, but we're also, little dot people among millions of people who can just get affected by something whole scale that we don't necessarily have control of.
Yeah, I like that you're kind of wrestling with this ambivalence at the end, right? It's is there another way that this could play out? It's not necessarily inevitable that this agenda that the big tech often takes is the only way, right? What are the other possibilities? But at the same time, it's we are also part of the many people that are I don't know, impacted and so on. Go ahead, Remy.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think I've been grappling with that question too. What would another path have looked like? And I mean, she lays something out in the last chapter, which is kind of the community-based, very, small scale, which is great. But when I think back to kind of the origins of OpenAI, I almost the issue they ran into immediately was a lack of capital and resources to fuel development, right? It was we need capital, we need data. Those were the big fuelers, right? And it's funny because I almost think that had Google beat ChatGPT, beat OpenAI to the punch in releasing, their model and becoming sort of the first mover, right? Google has extraordinary resources. They have an amazing amount of data, right? That, a question is is the data they've collected consensually enough to power a large language model, right?
Invented the transformer, yeah.
Yeah, but in some ways, Google was almost better positioned than OpenAI to deliver on ethical AI because they didn't need to and they had their issues too, right? We read about like how they they fired multiple of these like ethics researchers and all of this, and then they became part of the race to the bottom, right? But in some ways, I feel like OpenAI's kind of drift from the mission is it's intimately linked and inextricably linked from their like the organization's status, and also the fact that like they were a small startup trying to develop this machine and this like model that basically needed extraordinary resources, right? Like it put pressures, not to excuse them, but it put pressures on them because of that positioning in ways that I think led to a lot of the stealing and lying and cheating that ultimately has like paved the path, and that set the precedent in the sector, right? Like I think that's a really big problem, is that there was this New Zealand model, the like small, like community-based, whatever it is, right? And the fact that OpenAI went this other way didn't mean it had to be the only way, but they did start the precedent of like, this is what we're doing in this space now. And so I even think about like Anthropic, which, I'm curious what other folks think about Anthropic, because, my sense was that Karen Howe like kind of was like, well, Anthropic is kind of in the same bucket. Like they say they're the safety, the ethical, they've hired a bunch of these safety people, but it's just Dario Amadei's like vision for, he wants to be the one creating AI, right? And I also know that in many ways, like they have fallen to the same level. Like, they just paid this or agreed to pay $1.5 billion for like stealing, like pirating books for training their model, right? And that's not even, it's like $3,000 per book, right? Like, and there's still pushback. So I just wonder if like, because they were the first mover and they set this precedent, it's kind of like it is this race to the bottom now, and it brings me back to this question, like what would a different way have looked like in Silicon Valley?
I think bringing up Anthropic is really excellent here for this whole discussion, because in that last chapter there was no mention that, hey, it could look at Anthropic, they could pursue safety and ethically responsibly developed AI in a much better way, right? As you say, they fell prey to the same sort of path that she's criticizing. I actually also really appreciated just understanding the timelines of different people, like that Dario Amadei was one of the core people at OpenAI, that he had these huge safety kind of concerns, and that's what led to the splintering off into Anthropic and so on. Just understanding like Amadei and Musk and other people, how they all like came together and then fragmented off, was kind of very helpful. But anybody have any other thoughts on this? I had another take on the book, and I'm not really sure how fair it is, but I want to get your thoughts on this. So I feel like this the author Karen Howe is pretty critical of the mission and the ideology. She compares it to the empire's similar ideology used to justify a lot of all the colonialism and so on. But she's never a believer in AGI or the transformative impact of AI. I feel like the only thing she really questions is whether Sam Altman truly believes the mission. Do you think the book would have taken a much different perspective if she was more conflicted about whether AI was really like a society-changing technology? Or does her dismissal of AGI and its mission, or the mission of AGI, whatever, as just being a way to manipulate and exploit people for the company's own profitable ends, mean the book is much less balanced? I mean, you actually don't really know what the author's position on AI is, hardly at all. There's kind of one paragraph, I couldn't track it back down, but where she says that, she's not dismissing all AI, just the kind of bad parts of it.
I think she says it like at the end, like last chapter, I think.
There's actually a podcast. She appeared on Hard Fork podcast, the New York Times Hard Fork, with Kevin Roos and Casey Newton. And There's a good transcript there where she is a little more explicit in her own position on AI. They flat out ask her, "Do you use AI? You know, why not?" She draws a distinction between predictive AI and generative AI and says that if she uses AI, it's going to be more of the predictive kind, but she generally sees it as the fruit of the poison tree. Doesn't really want to use the products that have been that have such a dark origin and so on. But I think if she were more of a believer in AI, the book would have had a much more balanced take. What do you think of that?
I sort of feel like I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about the one of the points you just made, like the fruit from the poison tree, because as I mentioned to those of you who are on the last call, I've joined this book club from a different sector than most of you, which is I'm in the nonprofit sector. I consult for nonprofits on AI integration with kind of an ethical or responsible lens. And a lot of the people I talk to have sort of sworn off of AI, like they don't want to use it because of the ethical qualms, right? So I do, I want to come back to that because I'm really curious on folks' thoughts on that. But I also, on the point, Tom, you just made about like the balanced view, in some ways, I think the rest of the literature provides that. Like, there's so much hype and excitement about the future of AI. Like, most of the books we're reading don't really take a critical. I didn't read Supremacy, so I missed that one. I just joined last month, right? So, but like the books I've read, like Co-Intelligence and AI Superpowers, and like a lot of the stuff I read online takes a pretty uncritical view and like doesn't go deep on this. And so in some ways, I feel like I'm kind of glad that she didn't dilute her argument, because I haven't heard this like argument in its pure form yet. And there's so much of the alternative. Like this is just like a pebble on the scale where all of the boulders are on the other side, like saying AI, AGI, AI, right? Like, so that's kind of how I feel about it. And I also sort of, I think it's important to contend with this in any conversation. Like then you can still say like, have your own view on whether you use AI or not. I sort of personally feel like it's still value. And what I tell, clients I work with is like, it's really important to develop AI literacy in part by using AI so that you can advocate for better systems, because you need to understand what it is to advocate. But it's really important to also, like, this is the only balance I've seen in the conversation in the first place in some ways, like the deepest look at the other side.
Well, this is a point. Let's go even further here on the fruit of the poison tree. So Remy, how do you manage these conversations where people say, I don't want to be consuming the fruit of the poison tree because I don't want to be a part of this AI colonialism? How do you do that? Because I mean, most like companies are moving full steam ahead towards AI adoption. And this book makes you think, gosh, am I just like going down a path I don't want to go down? What do you say to those people?
I mean, I think it's actually a much more weighty question in the nonprofit sector, because it tends to be a lot of like very bleeding heart, like ethics first people, like they are like they've devoted their life and their career to like mission driven work. And so it weighs heavily on them. Like if you're like working at an environmental sustainability nonprofit and you're like, oh, should I use AI? And then you read about the impact of data centers, like there's kind of an inherent moral conflict there, right? Regardless of your sort of personal stuff, right? When I do like workshops, I have a few slides at the beginning. Like I always address the ethics questions up front. Frankly, until now, I didn't have nearly as deep an understanding of like the colonialist piece of it, like a lot of the stuff that Karen Howe breaks down, like what went into building it. So I have a few slides that talk about like the environmental piece, the like copyright piece, the the concerns about hallucination and bias, like job displacement, all of this stuff. And they're really complex questions. So you can't really address it in a short conversation or a workshop. But what I always come back to and try to tell people is like, this technology is here and it's already embedded in a lot of the other tools we're using, and it is not going away. Like 700 million people using ChatGPT every week. That's just ChatGPT. Don't even fold in the other large language models. Like it's already in a lot of our systems. So you can't not be contending with AI. And what I say is like, it's really important to grapple with the ethical questions and at the same time build literacy and use these tools so that you can understand them better. But there are different, I've seen like one sort of peer I have who does consulting for nonprofits on AI, like sometimes publishes ideas for like how to mitigate, like she posted on LinkedIn the other day about eco prompting, which is like, some framework for deciding, okay, like there's some environmental cost to each prompt. And I typically tell people, well, like here are all the other things that cost a lot environmentally that we don't really think about, right? And now a Google search costs more than a ChatGPT query because they also include their AI overview, right? But there are things like to meet people where they're at, like people who are really concerned about this on an individual level, like the kinds of people who live zero waste lifestyles, for example. I totally understand that, like they want to live in that way in alignment with their values. You have to meet those people where they're at to include them in the conversation about AI. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to do, is like figure out ways to talk to people who have different concerns across the ethical spectrum and across the adoption spectrum, and say like, let's actually talk about that, not ignore it. And we still need to build literacy and understand what this technology is to be able to participate in the conversation so you're not left behind.
I can see how your work in like the nonprofit industry really makes this issue a lot more visible and something you have to deal with. So yeah, thanks for sharing your thoughts on that. Does anybody else have any comment they want to add in this whole discussion? How do you wrangle with working with the fruit of the poison tree in your job if you're using AI, or how do you wrestle with some of these decisions?
Well, I thought it was useful, to hear Remy say that, you have to meet people where they're at, where, and it's a spectrum. And I would sort of use that to like sort of push back on the idea that she's like biased, because like we've read 6 books now, and everyone's positioned like differently on the range. And I actually like mapped it out. Like there's like Warner, who's like the most anti-AI, like doesn't want any part of it, doesn't want to use it, engage with it. Then there's the journalists. There was Parmy Olson, who tells a story that's basically like good intentioned people sold out. That's basically like her story. And then Karen Howe, like that it's, that there's something like, it's a critique of OpenAI, but also a critique of like, the trajectory of AI. And then like sort of in the pro camp, there's Lee and Suleiman, who are, founders and venture capitalists for AI. So they have a lot invested in it, but they also take it seriously enough to talk about the downsides of it and give policy ideas about how to fix it. And then there's Kurzweil, who's just, he's like utopian, who's also, paid by Google. So I feel like, everyone has like their own level of, everyone's situated in their own like place. Like, so no one's purely like objective about it. So I feel like, Karen Howe is coming from it from a journalist's point of view, but also someone who, studied technology in college and understands it well and is able to engage with it in a way that Warner does not.
I would even say that she has the well, I don't know, maybe this is controversial. Do you think Karen Howe has the option to fully say, no, I will not use AI and still remain 100% employed as a fully as a journalist moving full steam ahead? I feel like tech writers in companies, if you say I'm not going to use AI, you're not going to be employed for much longer, because people are going to say I need somebody who's going to be like 5 times more productive than those people.
Yeah, we're all kind of embedded in that sort of, I don't know, like compromised position, or maybe vexed position, because I just, there was an N+1 article that came out called Large Language Muddle, which talks about this sort of new, there's like this mini trend of like writer, humanities people, personal reflections about AI, where it starts like, I don't believe in AI, and then they use it, and then they're really impressed with it, then they feel vexed about it, and it basically ends with like this resignation, like, oh, it's here, I guess. Well, what do we do? And so, I think that there is like a growing movement or position for people who are in academia or the humanities that's not, their departments or endowments are not paid for by Google, who straight want to reject AI, and it's partly because they're not compromised, I guess, in the same way that people who work in tech do.
Sahir?
Yes, I just wanted to talk about this point that as a corporate worker, I do believe that now AI is a skill that I have to learn, and I do not have a choice in it. It's a tool my company has bought. I'm expected to learn it, I'm expected to use it, and I'm expected to work on maximum efficiency with AI. It's because the clients that we have also want to incorporate AI into their products, and I cannot create a product if I do not even understand AI. But I have a friend who is a teacher in humanities, and she does not like AI because she thinks that instead of students learning AI, they think that, oh, they can use AI to deceive this whole educational system, and they do not have to write assignments. Again, using the generative AI to create content, so they don't have to work. So I feel like that there is a little bit of gap there. If we maybe incorporate AI into humanities in a way that it actually creates more balance between this tech versus humanity gap, that would be great. And maybe we can bring more people to the table who can provide us with policies that benefit everybody.
Thanks. Anybody else have any comments or they're ready to share on anything?
I definitely agree that there's a knowledge gap, an information gap for a lot of people. And it was one of the few things at the end, like I felt kind of sad at the end of this book, like I do with a lot of books on AI. But one of the more uplifting things was that like we can take action and we can learn about it ourselves and share this information with others, so that other people are more informed. Like it felt like the one thing I could do something about. So
my wife has been watching me read this book for a while. I mean, it's a long book. It took a while to get through, right? But I was saying that it's pretty eye-opening, and it's just a harsh critique. And she's like, "Well, now do you believe AI is evil?" I was like, I don't know. It's such a difficult sort of conundrum, just to find yourself in, and I, coming back to Remy's earlier point, like AI is here. It's like not going away. It's going to be part of the fabric, and you just have to, I don't know, kind of accept that.
I also had a conversation with my wife who's very anti-AI, and just I feel like she thinks I'm like, drinking Kool-Aid, and and she works in a nonprofit. So, and we were talking about it, and she said, well, if you weren't in tech, would you be anti-AI? And I said, well, probably, but also I wouldn't know very much about it, because the more you learn about it, the more it becomes vexed. I mean, if you don't know anything about it, then you're going to have a cartoon version of what it is, and how powerful it can be and how much potential there is. And so that's a part of the vexation, because on the one hand, it's hard to ignore, if you read about them or learn about them, all the sort of negative things. But also, if you learn about the history of it and like the breakthroughs you realize how powerful it is and how impressive it is, and how important it could be. How important it already is for good or bad.
I mean,
Yeah.
sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
In some ways, I really I needed and appreciated the example in the last chapter, and I think we need more of those kinds of examples that divorce AI as a technology from the way the AI industry has evolved in the last 10 years because of OpenAI and others, right? Like, and I'm doing, like, I'm, as part of my, because now my job involves a lot of AI work, and so my organization is paying for me to do like an MIT course on AI. I'm learning a lot about machine learning and like the systems and how they work. And it is an amazing technology. It's like amazingly powerful. And it's actually like, ChatGPT is a testament to just how much can be accomplished just by this pattern recognition and replication mechanism, right? Like it's kind of unbelievable. But it's muddled by the fact of the way that OpenAI has evolved and the industry and all of this. And so in some ways, what I wish for and want is like more examples of like down to earth, like values grounded AI. And I think that would help bring people along into the conversation who are right now like, no way, I don't want to be part of this, right? Like, and that's where I think it's really important for people who are not the big tech CEOs to be in the conversation and talking about it, because the big tech CEOs are going to like lift up whatever examples serve them and their shareholders. But like everyone else, like I never would have heard about that New Zealand example if not for this book, right? Like that's niche and small and like probably didn't get much coverage. Maybe it was just Karen Howe's article, but like those are, I think, the opportunities to bring people into the conversation about AI. And again, going back to this question about like, how could it have looked different? I'm conflicted because in some ways, like the fact, this sort of phased like iterative deployment thing that they had, like the fact that they rushed it out allowed for, like, we're talking about this, many people across the world are talking about AI. It has created a much more global conversation and necessitated a much more global conversation about AI than if they had said, like, we're gonna, here's our behind a paywall research preview, we're just going to talk about it with industry leaders or something. I think it's good that everyone's engaging in the conversation. And at the same time, now that everyone's engaging in the conversation, we need pathways and pipelines for those people to like have a voice in it that are not just Sam Altman, right? And Derry Amadei. So
This is why, I mean, this whole topic and conversation is so multifaceted and complex. It's like why it's kept our attention. I agree. Like there's you mentioned that AI can kind of be just unbelievable how it works. Like it's kind of like magic. It can do some amazing things, and people who don't work with it might just see it as cartoony and just see all the negative aspects of it, like from the history of these companies. So yeah, it's a tough thing to wrestle with. Well, one characterization in the book that I liked was this distinction between boomers and doomers. Just to turn to a new topic here. This whole, like, these competing factions within OpenAI. I didn't know that like the company had all these different groups that were like, full steam ahead, and the others are like, no, safety, we're risking existential collapse. And it's like, that did you like this? Maybe these are terms that I just haven't been using as much, but boomer and doomer, did you like these terms? Did you find yourself asking whether you're a boomer or a doomer? Like, any thoughts on the boomer doomer dichotomy here? Do you have boomers and doomers within your own company? I think in order to be a doomer, you still have to be like somebody who believes AI could be so impactful as to lead to existential collapse. So
yeah, I think Elon Musk seemed, I mean, at least for a while, seemed to be a very big doomer.
Yeah.
I almost think, I mean, I don't know how prevalent, I don't know. I maybe we've read those terms in other books, but I feel like it really speaks to Karen Howe's ability to tell a really compelling story. Like it in a way, it almost feels like a thriller. And it in some ways like the boomers have won out. A moment I really liked at the sort of towards the end of the book is the moment where they have this all staff meeting where everyone's up in arms about the clawback clause that would take back their equity in the company if they like disparaged OpenAI after they left, and this sort of sense that I almost felt as a reader of everyone realizing that maybe Sam Altman isn't as good as they thought, and maybe they should let the board fire him. That to me seemed like a kind of awesome, like almost like a movie, like this like thriller moment where there's like this like turn. I guess that's speaking a little more about the composition of the book, which I thought it was such a compelling read.
I'm glad you brought up this point in the Sam Altman theme, because that is like a key strategic part of the book that is so fascinating. This podcast I mentioned earlier, Time to Say Goodbye, kind of asked Karen if Sam was really like a representation of Silicon Valley itself, in the sense where you have not just a leader of a company, but like a whole culture, Silicon Valley, that will manipulate and deceive in order to try to get what you want. We'll feed you the ideology and the mission and get you to believe it, but then use that in order to just like get more funding and more profit and so on. Do you think the depiction of Sam Altman was fair in this book? I mean, he definitely didn't come across as a good guy. I'm sure he hates this book. I don't know, but I'm also sure he would never, tell a person that to their face, right? It's like he'd tell you what you want to hear, and the other person what they want to hear, and then he would move to erase the people who are opposing his agenda and so on. But what do you think about Sam Altman's depiction in this book? Is Karen using it as like a larger device for telling the larger critique of AI itself, the AI tech companies themselves? We got another look at Sam Altman in Parmi Olson's book, Supremacy, if you read that one. It's also a very good book. It's more of a comparison between DeepMind, Demis Hassabis, and Sam Altman. But it's not as dark as this depiction of Sam in Howe's book. Any thoughts on the Sam Altman characterization?
I felt like after finishing the book, like it definitely wasn't a positive portrayal of Sam Altman, but I didn't feel like I felt like I wasn't being tricked into thinking his character was something other than it wasn't. Like, I don't feel like she went out of her way. Like, I felt like she was trying to be fair about it. But I couldn't decide to what degree did the events with OpenAI happen because of Sam Altman, or would that have happened anyway? Like that kind of like, is he? I think the book is trying to tell you that they were driven by him.
Yeah,
maybe, but like I didn't feel entirely convinced that we wouldn't still be talking about generative AI if Sam Altman weren't here. But at the same time, like the whole no technology is inevitable thought came to my mind, and like I agree with that. So I felt very confused at the end, honestly, about what role he played and like, in all of the events.
Dan, just your other point about the book being kind of a thriller where there's this moment where people realize, yeah, maybe he should have been fired. that was pretty cool too, right? It was like there's a lot of conflict that people have, and like their opinions change and their views change and so on. Yeah, we get that really inside look at that whole drama right behind the firing. I don't think any other book had so many details. I was even getting a little frustrated that there were too many names and details. I'm like, okay, we didn't need to go this deep, but hey, somebody got the inside scoop on that whole drama. in ways that I have not read anywhere else. So, sorry, somebody else started to say something, and then I jumped in.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I mean, I definitely, no person or leader is perfect, but I definitely came out thinking that Sam Altman is, not a great person to be the face of AI. I mean, like, and again, like, I don't know, is Dario Amodei the right person? Is Demis Hassabis? Yeah.
It's Hassabis, I think.
Okay. And like, I just again wonder, like, the people who end up being in charge of these hugely influential organizations, like, typically there's some, like, the people who amass the most wealth, typically there's a reason, like, they are not the most altruistic people, right? Like, if they've amassed a lot of wealth and power, like, maybe they're, they have redeeming qualities, but I think there's a heavy overlap or Venn diagram between, like, the people who end up being the most powerful and influential and those who have the tendencies that may lead us astray as a society. So, I mean, not across the board, but I'm not super surprised about this. And it is hard with Sam Altman because he has this, like, this charm, right? That's like his sort of thing. Like, the senators fell in love with him. Even Gary Marcus at one point was like, oh, maybe I was wrong, but like, it's, and it was hard to read about, like, this pattern of, what some people call manipulation or abuse, because, like, you can't really pin him on one thing, right? So I did come out with kind of Ilya Sutskever's take, which is that, like, regardless of where this is going, probably Sam Altman's not the right person to be the face of it, and yet he's the one we have.
The CEO or the head of the company takes on even more importance. You brought up Ilya Sutskever, right? Takes on even more importance because Sutskever's conflict is not just like, is this a good face of AI, but who should be the one who's going to hold this power when we launch AGI, which is going to be the equivalent of like an atomic bomb, right? You've got power to control the world with your AGI. And you want to make sure that the person who's like holding the reins of that technology in the company isn't using it maliciously. So it's if you're a believer in AGI, as Sutskever seems sincerely to be, it takes on added importance. I mean, he finally left because he was convinced that Sam wasn't the right person. I have a cat attacking me, not attacking me, coming to visit. If you believe that, like, AGI is no, hold on, sorry, you're gonna step on a key and it's gonna end everything. If you believe that AGI is the equivalent of the atomic bomb, you want to make sure that the right country has it, right? The right people have it that are going to use it to benefit humanity. And I guess he ultimately believed that Sam wasn't the right person. We still haven't really seen what his company is going to do, right? He formed a new company, Super Intelligence or Super Align. I don't know what it's called, but focused on safety, got like billions in funding, but I don't think it's launched, right? Anyway,
It seems like all of them have like started like a company, like Mira Murati, like Suleiman, like they've all done it.
Yeah, Mira Murati, she left and she has something called Thinking Labs or Thinking Machine something. It's like, wow, all these people just sort of were together and they're like the band, right? And then they broke up and then now they've got all their individual outlets and bands. Well, this book was definitely in the critical look at AI camp. Let me share a little bit about the next book before we have parting thoughts on whatever we want to say. So I threw in something totally different. This is a technical book. It's not going to be in the same vein as the others. We've read quite a bit now on like popular sort of audience books. So I thought, let's read something technical. I haven't read this one. I hope it's not outdated or bad, but this is going to be more of like an O'Reilly type of book. So we'll see. Hopefully it will ground us in a better understanding of things. Remy, you mentioned that you're going through like a whole MIT course, and just like you're understanding the nuts and bolts of how AI is working at a technical level. So that's next. And then we have some other stuff coming up as well. But it's definitely a different category of book. But I love the fact that like some of the books can take one position. Dan, you mentioned this. And thank you for sort of describing all these different books and their positions. It does feel enriching and deepening to read like a super critical take paired with a super utopian take, right? It feels more balanced. It feels like you can come to a discussion a lot less like you're just been drinking the Kool-Aid, but a little more like, okay, yeah, I understand. There's some issues, there's some benefits, and we move past the whole cartoony version of things of both sides, right? So, well, let's see. What last thoughts do we have that we want to say about this book before we wrap it up? Anybody have anything they've been wanting to say and they just haven't found the right space to say it? I love these discussions, by the way. You're all very smart, insightful people, so that it makes the club for sure. I appreciate you, and you've all read a lot of the book, all the book, so you're coming informed. You only need a few people to have a good discussion, so I really appreciate this, and just want to make sure everybody gets their thoughts out.
Yeah. I mean, I'll quickly say, yeah, thank you, all of y'all. I really appreciated this. I think I've been thinking a lot about what do we do moving forward, like in terms of like this regulation and like oversight. And it's like so hard because OpenAI is not open with its data model weights, and it's just so hard to the move from like AI being this thing of academia to being very close. Seen that with OpenAI, with Llama, Meta, and then like anyone who kind of speaks out against, I feel like, or is critical is starting going away and starting their own company, or we didn't talk a lot about the stochastic paper, which I thought was also a really interesting chapter. Yeah, so I don't know. I think just thinking a lot about there's so much that's kept private that it's really hard for other practitioners, the public, just really criticizes these, how these models are being built, I feel. And that's just something I'm thinking about.
Yeah, that's definitely a good benefit of Hao's book, right? It's in contrast to any kind of controlled discussion and openness, she's really trying to bear that open. And that's for sure one of the huge merits of this book. Thanks for adding that. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend and Sunday. And I'll see you on chat and next month, hopefully. Thanks again for coming.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.